David Ellis wasn't looking for anything special that afternoon. At 38, he was used to long, quiet days filled with worn-out pipes and water heaters that rattled like old bones. It was a plumber honest work, nothing glamorous. After his divorce, 3 years ago, he'd stopped expecting life to surprise him. He'd grown comfortable in the rhythm of repair jobs, truck rides, and lonely takeout dinners in his small apartment in Portland. But that Tuesday, something was different. He was almost done for the day, ready to head home when his phone buzzed with a last-minute job. A kitchen sink leak. The name read Claire Morgan. The voice message was polite but urgent. Someone could please come today. I'd really appreciate it. Something in her voice, soft, tired, holding back more than just stress, made him say yes. Even though he usually wouldn't take a late job, he pulled up to her townhouse around 3 p.m. It was in a quiet neighborhood tucked between two tree-lined streets, the kind of place that looked like it hadn't changed in 10 years. He knocked twice, toolbox in hand, already running through what might be wrong with the sink. The door opened, and for a second, the world slowed down. Claire stood there, maybe 36 or 37, tall, with auburn hair pulled loosely into a bun, wearing an oversized sweater and jeans, barefoot. Her eyes met his own for a moment. They held. There was something in them, something aching. She smiled faintly. You must be David. Thanks for coming. He nodded, stepping inside. The air in the house was clean, but still, like it hadn't been stirred in days. No music, no TV, just a soft ticking from a wall clock and the gentle scent of vanilla from a candle burning on the kitchen counter. Sink's just in here, she said, leading him in. He followed her, noticing the small details, the wine glass on the table still half full, the open book by the window, the faint echo of loneliness that lingered in the quiet. David knelt by the sink, opening the cabinet doors. Not too bad, he said. Just a loose seal and a bit of rust. Give me 20 minutes. She nodded, leaning against the counter, watching him, not in a way that felt intrusive, but like she hadn't had company in a long time. He focused on the job, trying not to notice her too much, but it was hard not to. There was something deeply human about her presence. Not flashy, not flirtatious. It's just real. Like a woman who had once been happy but had forgotten how to be. A few minutes passed, filled only by the soft sounds of tools tapping against metal and the occasional shift in her breath. Then click, he turned his head. Claire had quietly walked to the kitchen door and closed it. And locked it. David straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. Everything okay? He asked. She looked at him, her arms crossed, nervous but calm. I'm not going to hurt you, she said softly. I just needed a moment, a real moment, with someone who doesn't lie to me. He froze. She wasn't playing games. Her voice was too raw for that. I'm sorry, she added, her voice trembling. I know this is weird. I've had the kind of year where you start forgetting what it feels like to be touched, to be seen. My husband left Evan out of nowhere. One day, he's here. The next, he's moved in with his assistant in Seattle. I didn't even get a goodbye. It's just a note. And now it's been 6 months. Half a year of waking up alone, cooking for one, staring at the walls, wondering if it was something I did or something I didn't. David stayed quiet, standing still. He was trained to handle water pressure, broken valves, and angry homeowners, but not this. I know I shouldn't have locked the door, she said, but you're here. You seem kind. And I guess I just wanted to stop time for a second. There was a long pause. I'm not asking for anything, she added. I don't even know what I'm saying. Maybe I just wanted to feel like I still exist. David met her eyes, and he understood. More than she knew. He, too, had once sat in a silent kitchen staring at the outline of a wedding photo he had taken down. He had known what it felt like to be left behind, to become invisible. I see you, he said, and those 3 words, so simple, yet so powerful, hung between them like something sacred. He didn't move closer. She didn't step away. They just stood there, two strangers bound by their own quiet heartbreaks. In a kitchen filled with something neither of them expected, connection. Asterisk after David fixed the sink and left. Claire's kitchen that afternoon. Something inside him stayed behind, like a silent echo. He couldn't stop thinking about the way she looked at him, so fragile yet fierce. Like a woman standing on the edge of breaking but refusing to fall. And Claire, she wasn't just lonely. She was lost in a maze of silence and unspoken pain, the kind that buries itself deep in your bones and steals your breath. When David called her a few days later to check if the sink was holding, she surprised him by inviting him back inside. I want to talk, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't an invitation a plumber usually gets after a job. But this wasn't just a job anymore. That second visit felt different. The air between them thickened, charged with something neither dared to name yet. Claire poured 2 glasses of wine and sat close enough that David could see the trembling of her hands. I don't know why I asked you here, she admitted, eyes downcast. But since Evan left, the house feels empty, like I'm living inside a memory I can't escape. David nodded, understanding too well the weight of ghosts in a home. It's like the silence gets louder than the noise ever was, he said softly. They both laughed, a small, bitter sound. But then the laughter faded, and Claire's eyes filled with tears she didn't wipe away. He left me without a word. David, no fights, no reasons, just gone. And every day since, I've been pretending I'm okay. Her honesty cracked something. Open in him. I know that feeling, he said, voice low. My marriage didn't end with words either. Just ... emptiness. Nights when the bed felt too big. And mornings when I wondered if I'd ever feel whole again. For a long moment, they sat quietly, sharing pain without judgment. Just 2 broken souls finding a strange comfort in each other's presence. Then Claire looked up and said something that surprised David. I locked the door last time because I was scared. Scared that you might see through the cracks. See the parts of me I hide, even from myself? David reached out and gently took her hand. Sometimes it's the cracks that make us real, he whispered. Not perfect. Not fixed. Just human. Her lips trembled and she swallowed hard. I don't know if I remember how to trust anymore, she confessed. After Evan, after everything, ... I'm afraid of letting someone in. David squeezed her hand. You don't have to decide that now, he said. Not tonight. Just let me be here. No pressure. No expectations. The vulnerability between them deepened, turning into a tender kind of intimacy that wasn't about lust or desperation, but something more honest, something rare. Claire leaned into him slightly, the warmth of his hand grounding her in the moment. I've been trying to fix things around this house, like broken cabinets, flickering lights, but it's like I'm trying to fix myself too. And I don't know where to start. David smiled gently. Sometimes you don't have to start alone. He paused, searching for the right words. Maybe letting someone in isn't about fixing. Maybe it's just about being seen, really seen and still being accepted. She looked at him, eyes glistening with tears she couldn't hide now. I want that, she said quietly, more than anything. They talked late into the evening, sharing stories about their pasts as struggled to reconnect with his teenage daughter. Her endless attempts to keep her career alive while managing the pain at home. The weight of their confessions didn't push them apart. It pulled them closer, weaving a fragile thread of trust. There was a softness in David's voice when he spoke, a careful kindness that Claire hadn't felt in years. And she realized that, for the first time, she didn't have to pretend to be strong at one point. David noticed a photograph on the mantel, a picture of Claire and a man smiling on what looked like a sunny day at the beach. He asked gently, Is that Evan? She hesitated, then nodded. Before it all fell apart, her voice cracked. I still remember the good days. But now, the memories feel like shadows. David didn't press. Instead, he reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. The simple touch made her heart race, a reminder that she was alive. That connection was possible even in Brooke-Ness. Suddenly, Claire's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen and sighed. "It's him," she said, voice low and heavy. "Evan still calls sometimes. Wants to talk." "I don't know if I should answer." David looked at her with quiet understanding. "You don't have to decide that right now," he said. "Whatever you choose, I'll respect it." The room fell silent again. Neither wanted to rush or push the fragile moment. David felt something. He hadn't expected a growing protectiveness, a desire to be more than just a plumber who fixed sinks. He wanted to be someone who fixed hearts, even if just a little. Before he left that night, Claire walked him to the door. Their hands brushed, and the warmth lingered longer than necessary. She looked up at him with an honesty that was almost painful. "Thank you, David, for coming back, for listening." He smiled, his own heart heavier than before. "Anytime, Claire. You're not as alone as you think." As he walked to his truck under the dim streetlights, David's mind raced. He wasn't sure what this was, friendship, something more, but he knew he was already caught in a story he didn't want to escape. And Claire, alone in her silent kitchen, felt something stir inside her for the first time in months. Hope. It rained the next time David came over, soft, steady, like the kind of rain that makes the world feel smaller and the silence feel louder. Claire had called him again, this time with no excuse about plumbing. "The light in the hallway's flickering," she said over the phone, though her voice gave away the real reason she didn't want to be alone. David didn't ask questions. He showed up in jeans and a hoodie, hair still damp from the drizzle, carrying only a flashlight and a quiet smile. Claire met him at the door, barefoot again, wearing one of those long cardigans that made her look both elegant and vulnerable. "Still broken?" he asked gently. She shrugged. Maybe not." They both smiled, knowing the hallway light wasn't the only thing flickering. Inside, the house felt warmer than usual, not from the heater, but from something unspoken. Growing between them, they didn't rush the moment. David checked the hallway bulb, pretending to be focused, while Claire sat nearby, watching him, sipping her tea like it helped her steady her nerves. There was a kind of closeness that didn't need words now, something that had quietly taken root between them. The kind of closeness that happens when someone sees the worst in you and doesn't flinch. After he fixed the light again. Maybe broken, maybe not. Claire invited him to stay for dinner. "I ordered Italian," she said, almost shyly. "There's wine, if you're up for it." David hesitated only a moment before nodding. "I'd like that." They ate at the kitchen table, candles flickering, the rain tapping against the windows like a soft rhythm in the background. She asked him about his daughter, Maddie, 16, stubborn, lives with her mom in Seattle. He talked about trying to stay connected, how she barely answered texts now. Claire listened closely, the way people listen when they actually care. Then she spoke about her own regrets, how she gave too much of herself to Evan, how she ignored the signs that he was slipping away, how she lost pieces of herself trying to save a marriage that was already gone. "I was always the one holding it together," she said, staring at her wine glass. "And one day, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize who I was holding it together for." David reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "You still know who you are, Claire," he said softly. "You're just learning how to hear your own voice again." The moment hung between them, heavy and tender. Claire stood and walked over to the window, watching the rain trail down the glass. David followed, standing just behind her. She didn't turn around. Instead, she whispered, "Do you ever think maybe two broken people could actually work?" He paused before answering. "I think broken people understand each other in ways whole people never could." She turned then, eyes wide and searching, heart racing. "David," she started, but the words got caught in her throat. He stepped closer, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "You don't have to say anything," he said. "I feel it too." And then, without planning it, Without thinking too much because they'd both thought too much for too long, Lee leaned in and David met her halfway. Their lips touched gently, cautiously, like a question being asked and answered at the same time. It wasn't a kiss born of lust or impulse, it was full of longing, of months of unspoken words, of two people who had been hurt deeply and were still brave enough to feel something real. The kiss deepened, slow and full of heat, but also full of care. David's arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her close. And Claire melted into him like she'd been waiting for this moment longer than she could admit. They kissed like they needed it, like they were afraid it might be taken away. When they finally pulled apart, breathless and quiet, Claire rested her forehead against his chest. "I didn't expect this," she murmured. David held her tighter. "Neither did I." But neither of them moved away. Later, they sat on the couch, her legs tucked under her. His arm around her shoulders, the warmth between them no longer subtle. The storm outside had passed, but the storm inside of emotions, of attraction, of fear still stirred. David looked at her and asked quietly, "Are you okay?" Claire nodded slowly. "I think I am. I think for the first time in a long time, I actually feel something real." They didn't talk about what it meant or where it was going. They didn't rush to define it. But in that quiet room with the scent of rain in the air and two hearts finally brave enough to touch, they both knew something had changed. It wasn't just about fixing a sink anymore. It was about fixing something much deeper, something they hadn't even known was still broken. The days that followed felt like they belonged to a different life. Claire and David didn't call it anything what was blooming between them, but it showed up in small, quiet ways. He started stopping by even when there was nothing broken. Sometimes with coffee, sometimes with dinner, sometimes just with a calm presence that filled the silence she used to drown in. They sat close on the couch, legs barely touching, eyes flicking to each other like teenagers unsure how far to go. One night while she folded laundry and he read the newspaper, Claire looked up and said, "I never realized how lonely I'd become until I wasn't anymore." David put the paper down and just looked at her, not saying a word because some things didn't need words. They kissed more often now, longer, deeper, like each kiss was trying to repair something cracked inside them both. And though they hadn't crossed the line into anything more physical, the tension between them buzzed in every touch, every glance, every brush of fingers that lingered too long. There was affection in the way he always brought her groceries, without asking, or how she made sure to keep his favorite beer in the fridge. There was desire too, but the kind that grew slow and honest, like a fire built carefully, not rushed. And yet under all the warmth, there was something Claire hadn't told him. She sat with it like a stone in her chest, a secret she hadn't planned on keeping. But each day she waited, it got harder to speak. It wasn't that she didn't trust him, it was that she didn't trust the timing. Because a week before David first knocked on her door to fix the sink, Evan had shown up again. Not in person, but in a message. A long late-night email full of regret and confusion. He'd broken up with the assistant he left her for. He wanted to meet. He didn't beg, but he hinted. And Claire never responded. She wasn't ready, but she didn't delete it either. And that silence, her silence, grew heavier the more she fell into David's arms. One night after they'd shared a slow kiss in the kitchen that left them both breathless, David had whispered, "You feel like home." And it shattered her. Because home wasn't supposed to be built on secrets, David, for his part, had let his guard down more than he thought he ever would again. He told Claire about his ex-wife remarrying, about the ache of being a weekend dad to a daughter who used to call him every night but now barely texted. "Sometimes I wonder if she even misses me," he confessed one evening. Claire had taken his hand and said, "She does. She's just learning how to hurt in silence, like the rest of us." That night, they fell asleep on the couch, clothes on, but hearts open, limbs tangled like they belonged there. For the first time in years, David felt peace. Not excitement, not lust. but something deeper: safety, trust. But what he didn't know was that Evan had sent another message, this time asking to meet in person. Just coffee. No pressure, he wrote. I just want to say the things I never did. And Claire, against her better judgment, had agreed. She didn't tell David. She told herself it was just closure, that she needed to hear him say it out loud, that he was truly gone from her life. That way, whatever she was building with David could be clean, untangled, honest. But guilt clung to her like perfume she couldn't wash off. She canceled their next dinner, said she had a migraine. David believed her, of course. He was kind like that, gentle, trusting. But when Claire met Evan 2 days later at a small downtown cafe, the past hit her like a wave. He looked tired, older, but still familiar. They talked, and when he apologized, really apologized, she didn't cry, didn't forgive him either. But she listened. And for a few terrifying moments, she remembered why she loved him once, why she thought forever was possible with him. That scared her more than anything, because David's face kept flashing in her mind, his hands, his warmth, the way he looked at her like she was something sacred. Claire left the cafe without promising anything. She didn't hug Evan. She didn't say she'd call. But she hadn't told David about it. Not yet. She told herself it wasn't betrayal. But it felt close. Later that night, when David came by with Chinese takeout and a stupid joke about fortune cookies always being wrong, Claire laughed, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. He noticed. Everything okay? He asked, gently cupping her chin. Yeah, she lied. Just tired. And they ate dinner in front of the TV, pretending nothing had changed, while something between them quietly, invisibly, began to shift. David felt it before Claire ever said a word, that quiet shift in the air, the way she pulled back ever so slightly when he touched her. The way her smile dimmed even though she tried to fake it. Something in her eyes had changed. At first, he told himself it was nothing, maybe stress, maybe just a bad week. But deep down, a part of him, the part that had once watched his marriage fall apart in slow motion, knew better. One night as they sat on the couch, her head on his shoulder but her body tense like she was somewhere else, David finally asked, Claire, is there something you're not telling me? She didn't answer right away. She sat up slowly, ran her fingers through her hair, and looked at him like she didn't know how to say what was coming next. Evan reached out. She said, her voice quiet and careful. A while ago, David's heart sank, but he stayed still. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, and he asked, I met him, she said, and those 3 words felt like a slap. Not because I wanted him back, she added quickly, but because I needed to hear him say it. I needed to hear why he left. David stared at her, trying to process what he was hearing. And did it help? He asked, his voice even, but not warm. Claire nodded slowly. In some ways, yes. It reminded me that I was right to let him go. He's still the same, still full of guilt, but not enough courage. But I didn't tell you because I didn't want to hurt you. Didn't want you to think I was slipping back. David looked away, jaw tight, heart heavy. But you did hurt me, he said quietly. It's not because you met him, but because you didn't tell me. You let me walk in here with food and kisses and trust, and you were holding that secret like a match near a fire. Claire's eyes welled up. I know. I was wrong, but I was scared. I haven't felt this close to someone in so long, and I didn't want to lose you. I thought maybe I could pretend it never happened. David stood up, pacing the room, his hand on the back of his neck. Claire, I don't need you to be perfect, he said. I just need you to be honest. That's all. It's just real with me. That's what we've been from the start, right? 2 broken people trying to figure out if there's still something left inside us worth sharing. The silence between them stretched too long. Claire wiped at her tears and stood too, facing him now. You're right, she said. I should have told you, okay? And I don't expect you to just forget it. But please don't let this be the end of whatever we're becoming. David stared at her, this woman who had gone from a stranger behind. A half-closed door to someone who now lived in the softest parts of his heart, and he felt torn. He wanted to hold her, but part of him ached with fear. "I don't know what this is yet, Claire," he said. "But I know it's the most real thing I felt in years. I just need time to trust again. That's not something I give easily anymore." She nodded, stepping closer, wrapping her arms around him slowly, cautiously, like someone reaching out into the dark, praying not to be left alone again. David hesitated, then let his arms fall around her too. "I don't want to lose you over this," she whispered. "And I don't want to lose myself trying to make something perfect. But what we have, it matters, even if it's messy." David rested his chin on her hair, inhaling her scent. Familiar now, lavender and something warm like home. "Messy's fine," he said, "but no more secrets. I've lived through too many of those already." She pulled back just enough to look up at him, her eyes soft but scared. "No more secrets," she promised. And just like that, something cracked open, again not broken, but open, raw, and real, with space to breathe and space to rebuild. Later that night, they didn't make love, not yet, but they lay in bed together, facing each other in the dark, their fingers tangled like vines. There were no fireworks, no dramatic music, just the sound of two hearts beating a little unevenly, trying to find the same rhythm. Outside, the world kept moving, but inside that quiet bedroom, Claire and David were learning how to forgive, not just each other, but themselves. And even though there were still things to sort through, even though the past hadn't disappeared for the first time, it felt like maybe, just maybe, something lasting was starting to grow. Asterisk. The seasons had started to shift again, trees turning golden, the air crisp and cool, when Claire finally felt the weight in her chest begin to ease. It had been a month since that night, the one where everything could have broken apart. But somehow it hadn't. She and David hadn't rushed anything. After the argument, and maybe that's what saved them, they gave each other space, but not distance, time, but not silence. And in those in-between moments, when she texted just to ask how his day was, or he dropped off coffee on her porch with a handwritten note that said, "Still here, still yours," they began to rebuild something new. Something that didn't have to be perfect to be real. Claire learned to stop punishing herself for the things she couldn't change. The past had happened. Evan had left. Her heart had shattered. But David hadn't run, not even when she gave him reason to. And for a woman who had once spent years trying to hold on to someone who didn't want to be held, that meant more than any grand romantic gesture ever could. One chilly Friday evening, Claire invited David over for dinner. No takeout, no pretense she actually cooked. It wasn't perfect, the chicken was a little dry, the wine glasses mismatched, but the moment he walked through the door and smiled, everything felt right. They sat at the table like two people who had lived 100 lives before finally landing in the one they were meant for. After they ate, they didn't move to the couch like usual. Claire stood up, nervous and steady all at once, and reached for David's hand. "I want to show you something," she said softly. She let him down the hallway, past the now perfectly working light, to her bedroom, not for what he thought, not yet. She opened a drawer and pulled out a small box. Inside were pieces of her old life photos, a ring she never wore, a printed copy of the last message Evan sent. "This," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I've been holding on to it all, out of habit, out of fear. It is time to let it go." David didn't speak. He just stepped forward, gently closed the box, and said, "Then let's do it together." They took the box out to the backyard fire pit. Claire knelt down, lit a match, and dropped it in. The flames caught quickly. The photo curled, the letter blackened, and the past started to disappear just like that. She stood beside David, arms crossed tightly, but she wasn't cold. She was releasing. And when he reached for her hand, she didn't hesitate. Night, they made love for the first time, not rushed, not lustful, but slow and intentional, full of tenderness and quiet understanding. Every kiss felt like a question answered, every touch like a promise kept. It wasn't about filling a void or forgetting someone else. It was about choosing each other. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. In the weeks that followed, things didn't suddenly become easy. They still had their own lives, David, with his long work hours and his teenage daughter's complicated moods. Claire with the memories that still sometimes knocked the wind out of her. But now they had something solid. They had each other. One Sunday morning, while they were walking in the park holding hands and sharing a coffee, Claire asked, "Do you ever think about how this all started?" David laughed. "You mean this sink that mysteriously broke for no real reason?" She grinned. "Yeah, that one." He leaned in, kissed her forehead, and said, "You didn't need something fixed, Claire. You just needed someone to see you." And I did. That night they sat by the fireplace, legs tangled, laughter soft and quiet between them. And Claire looked at him and realized she was no longer afraid. Not of being hurt, not of being left behind. Because even if the future was still unknown, what she had now was real. The next time Evan reached out, just a short text that read, "Just wanted to see how you've been." Claire didn't respond. Not out of anger, not even out of sadness, but because she didn't need to anymore. She looked at David, who was in the kitchen humming to himself while pouring wine, and she smiled. The door to her past was closed now, locked even. What mattered now was what she chose to keep hand. She chose this. Him, them, not perfect, but honest. Not flashy, but full of heart. And as David walked over, sat beside her and raised his glass, Claire leaned in close and whispered, "Thank you for not just fixing the sink, but for fixing the part of me I thought was broken for good." David clinked his glass to hers and smiled. "You were never broken, Claire. You just forgot how much you were worth." And with that, they toasted to something rare love that came late but right on time.